I can't believe that I've lived in Florida my entire life, and I had never been to the John F. Kennedy Space Center at Cape Canaveral, despite being interested in astronomy since I was a little kid watching the DVD boxed set of the original Cosmos with Carl Sagan. I even took an astronomy elective in college, but I got a D+, which was my first clue that I was not going to end up in a STEM career or as a professional cosmologist. I've continued to follow news about NASA, SpaceX, exoplanets, gravitational waves, the Webb telescope, etc., but what finally got me to the Kennedy Space Center for the first time was my lovely wife, who got us tickets and a hotel room on Cocoa Beach for my birthday to watch the launch of the Artemis 1 spacecraft, our return to the moon. So, as a proud Floridian and amateur space enthusiast, what did I think of the Space Center? The short answer is that it was awesome. But it was also a little bit like Disney World Goes to Space, but mainly it was just awesome. I want to mention briefly where it's located for anyone who doesn't know exactly where the Space Center is. It's on Merritt Island, which is not really an island since it's connected to the mainland by this narrow strip of land right here. There's also Cape Canaveral, which is located across this body of water that is somewhat oddly called the Banana River. It's interesting to note that Cape Canaveral is actually one of the oldest surviving European place names in the United States. It was named by Spanish explorers in the early 1500s, Cabo Cañaveral, spelled the same but with a little tilde over the N, meaning reed bed or sugarcane plantation. Today, there is a United States Space Force station. That's right, we have a Space Force now. And there are launch pads on both Cape Canaveral and Merritt Island. I found it interesting, but it also made total sense that both SpaceX and Blue Origin, private spaceflight companies owned by billionaires, are also set up on Merritt Island. There is a big Blue Origin facility conspicuously located right by the turn into the Kennedy Space Center parking lot. And while the Artemis rocket sat on one of the launch pads in the distance, another pad was occupied by a SpaceX rocket while we were there. There's a wildlife preserve on Merritt Island, and even though you'd think that all the giant earth-shaking launches would disturb the animals, I saw more dolphins in the water on the drive over the causeway to Merritt Island than I've ever seen in one place before in my entire life. At the Space Center, we waited in a long line of traffic to get into the park. I was told upwards of 100,000 visitors were in town this particular weekend for the Artemis launch. I feel it's right to refer to the Space Center as the park, because in many ways this experience was very much like going to a space-themed Disney World. There are certainly real working NASA facilities on Merritt Island and Cape Canaveral, but the visitor center is more like Epcot or Universal Studios than anything else. The typical flow of things would be to wait in line for 10 to 15 minutes to be let into a large room or theater and watch a short film. Then the next set of doors would open in the back and we would proceed into the next room to look at an exhibit. The movies they had us watch weren't long, but they were very well made, very patriotic, and sometimes quite inspirational. In the Apollo program-themed room, we sat in stadium seating behind the actual equipment used in the control room during the moon missions while we watched our video. Then we exited into a museum gallery with actual spacesuits and lunar landers and much more. It was pretty incredible to see the ingenuity NASA used to pull off these moon missions. I learned that the tires of the lunar rover were made with piano wire, and these seats look like they just use your dad's old lawn furniture from the 1960s. I guess it's lightweight. They had Alan Shepard's spacesuit, a moon rock you could actually touch, but the highlight of this particular building was a real Saturn V rocket, the kind actually used to go to the moon. This thing was huge. And it's crazy to think that as they burn the fuel up, they just keep throwing away these giant sections until all that's left is the little module at the top called the LEM and the lunar lander. In the Space Shuttle Atlantis building, we waited in line through 3 cycles of the movie to be let into a standing room only area where an 8-minute film was projected IMAX style on the walls. It was also inspiring and patriotic, but one of the coolest moments of the day was when the back wall suddenly opened up and the nose cone of the Space Shuttle Atlantis, suspended from the ceiling, was pointed right at us. The shuttle gallery had a lot of stuff for kids, things to climb on, and a little space-themed arcade geared to younger people. This was the Chuck E. Cheese of the Kennedy Space Center, but learning about the shuttle while it hung over us was captivating. We visited in August, a month when a lot of Europeans take their vacations, and so for the whole day, I would say the crowd was very much international. I heard a lot of British accents, but also German, French, Japanese, Korean, and I'm sure other nationalities were also represented. As an American, I did feel a lot of pride in my nation's accomplishment of being the first to land on the moon. Credit was also paid to the Soviet Union for their pioneering work in space, like launching Sputnik, the first artificial satellite put into orbit, and putting the first human, Yuri Gagarin, in space. But listening to President Kennedy's speech where he set our sights on the moon, and then seeing footage of the flag being planted on the lunar surface was definitely stirring. There were at least 2 moments when I got a little choked up and emotional, and one of them was a direct result of all the international visitation. In the line to see the shuttle, I was very aware of all the different nationalities and races of people around me. Everyone was speaking their own languages and dealing with their own rowdy kids, lots of family units from around the world. It was kind of chaotic at first, but when we got into the theater and the engines of the shuttle roared on the IMAX screen, everyone stood in silence and awe together. And when the doors opened and the shuttle Atlantis was right there in front of us, we all felt the same wonder. It was palpable. I really felt in that moment that our cultural differences melted away and we were one human family. I remember being inspired to see everyone so emotionally united. It gives me hope that one day we will see each other as equal partners in our responsibility to care for the planet and each other, and that we will be able to work together to benefit all of humanity instead of dividing ourselves along borders and social boundaries. The other part that had me choked up, but I didn't get any video of it, was walking across the actual gantry used by the Apollo 11 astronauts. They called it the Hero's Walk, and as I slowly crossed the same steel grating that Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins crossed that fateful day in 1969, looking down, it was like I could feel their emotions from that day, and my eyes watered a little bit. After that, we got some freeze-dried astronaut ice cream, which was not as good as I remembered as a kid, but freeze-drying is awesome, and I feel like that's just something you gotta do. If you're planning on visiting the Space Center, one tip is to bring in your own food. You can carry in soft-sided coolers, just no glass bottles, hard containers, or alcohol. We brought in Publix subs, and I was glad we did because I didn't see any real restaurants within the Space Center, just an overly busy snack bar selling basic hamburgers, hot dogs, and nachos. As for the Artemis launch that we came to see, scheduled for that Monday, by now you probably know it didn't happen, which is a shame since we got up early and went out to the beach where we were staying and had a perfectly clear and unobstructed view of the launch pad. NASA was having some pressure and temperature issues with one of the engines and had to scrub the launch, so that was disappointing. My only solace was that we weren't alone in that disappointment, and in fact, having just come from the other coast of Florida, we were probably among those who had traveled the least distance to be there. Talking to some of the space launch watching veterans on the beach made it sound like something I'll definitely want to come back and witness for myself someday, so I'll have to make it a point to do so and come back to the Space Coast soon. Our little road trip wasn't over after the Kennedy Space Center visit, though. Next, we visited the Ocala National Forest for a trip into wild Florida and to dip into some of the wonderful and beautiful freshwater springs. I got some pretty good footage of that, so look for another nature video coming soon. In the meantime, thanks for watching, and thanks for discovering Florida with us.